Welcome to Dieting with Dignity Cooking School. Today we're going to teach knife skills. We're going to start with showing the different types of knives and also offer different types of cuts. So it's so important for a chef, especially a beginning chef, to know how to use a knife. Without you knowing how to use a knife, things tend to happen like cut fingers or missing fingers, and that's not a good thing. So if we use a knife correctly, we'll learn how not to make our fingers disappear, how to keep our fingers correctly positioned onto our hand, and how to cut food and make the food look perfect. So let's go through the different types of knives. The first knife I like to show you is a chef knife, and I have lots of different types of chef knives here. We're going to look at all the different types and decipher which one might be the best for you. So this is a typical chef knife. I think this one's a 10-inch or 8-inch chef knife. And there's a couple things that are really important to see. First is this distance from the handle to the blade. If we have lots of distance, there's plenty of room for our hands to fit underneath the blade. When we make cuts, our hands don't hit the table. Poorly designed knives don't have a big distance here, so if I use this to cut, my knuckles hit the table, causing pain. Other knives, such as this one, which has a tine that comes down and the blade is at an angle, makes it also difficult to cut because the rocking motion isn't very effective. Makes it difficult to handle. So, the best kind of chef knives to get, I believe, are the ones that are typically designed as a typical traditional chef knife. There's also one more addition, which is this one's the Santoku, which has a different type of blade. It still has a great fit for the blade from the handle, so your hand fits underneath there really clearly, but it's kind of a cross between a cleaver and a chef knife. So it's able to do lots of work and also easy to pick stuff up from the cutting board once you get things on the cutting board. So before we start, something we need to do. This cutting board is going to move around a whole bunch on the table if I don't first figure out a way to make it stay still. So I'm just going to wet a cloth, simply wet a cloth, lift up my cutting board, and I'm going to dump this cloth right here underneath. So it gives me some stability and also makes it so this cutting board is not going to move around. So let's make some cuts. Okay, we're going to start with, what are we going to start with? How about green onions? Because green onions are pretty simple to cut. We really want to focus on the motion of cutting. So I'm going to use this chef knife, and my job is to keep my knuckles attached to my hand. So I want to position my knuckles against the knife so there's no possible way for those fingertips to get underneath the blade. So as I cut, I want to ensure that my tip stays on the board, my knuckles are curled under, and I will use those knuckles as a guide, with those knuckles always touching my blade. If I do that, keep my fingertips curled under, it's impossible for me to cut my fingers. This is going to take some practice. So I suggest that you practice all the time. First of all, a sharp knife is very important. So I'm going to put an edge onto the chef knife. I'm not sharpening the knife. The blade of the knife has feathers, and those feathers make it really sharp. If I use the knife a lot, the feathers kind of bend over from side to side. That blade doesn't become, or loses its sharpness. So I'm going to make those feathers stand back up and make the tip of the knife really sharp. So I do that by using the steel, which is sharper than the knife. Just feather that tip of the knife right back up. My knife is sharp again. So now it's time to cut. I have a sharp knife, I have tasty green onions, scallions, spring onions, all the same thing. I'll make the edges stay together, and my first thing is I want to make sure I can discard the stuff I'm not going to use. And these little tiny roots are something I don't want to eat. So I'm going to put all of them together, butt them up against the end, put the tip of my knife blade on the cutting board, knuckles curled under, and simply push the knife forward. In a sharp knife, I don't have to saw. All I have to do is let the knife do the work. Push the knife forward, where you can disregard the pieces that we're not going to use. Now I have green onions. So, I have them buttered up. They're all the same size. I know that I want the green onion, the white part, and some of the green part. So I'm simply going to put my knife rested on the cutting board and work my way up, with my knuckles always remaining underneath the knife. And if I continue to use the rocking motion with the tip of the knife on the board, then I can look at the camera, I can look at you and not cut my fingertips off. Ow! I'm kidding. That didn't happen. Okay, so green onions. Perfectly, so we'll move these across over here off of the cutting board and move on to something else. So that's our chef knife. If I want to cut something really small, like I want to take this carrot and trim off the end, then I could use the tip of my thumb as a guide and simply cut the top of this carrot off to trim it up. It's really important to remember that the right size knife has to fit the right size job. So if I have something really big to do, like cut the tip of this carrot off with this big chef knife, I now have done something that's not so safe, something kind of dangerous. So I don't want to do that. So what I want to do is use the right size knife for the right size job. So what's the right size knife to do different types of work? Let me show you some knives. This knife is called a carver. See how long it is? It's meant to carve down meat in a long straight line without having to saw back and forth. It's extremely sharp and with a flexible blade. So if I want to carve around a bone, I could do that. If I want to carve the turkey on Thanksgiving, I can carve around the bone, cut the breast off, and this knife does the trick. This is a serrated knife, and if I choose to cut bread, serrated knife is a perfect option to use. Some people use this to cut tomatoes because they don't have a really sharp chef knife. And this will cut tomatoes, but it won't leave a beautiful little straight line down that tomato like we like to see. So chef knife is the right tool for that. If you don't have a chef knife that's really sharp, you can use the serrated knife. This knife is called a bony knife, and it's extremely flexible. So if I want to bone fish or a piece of meat, this allows me to work up and down the edges of the meat or the fish, and I can carve around the bones and take that piece of meat off of the fish without damaging the flesh. So a bony knife, we've already been introduced to this. Two other options are cleavers, and cleavers work for a lot of different things. Many people believe that cleavers are only meant for Asian food. Not so true. Cleavers are a wonderful tool to cut lots of food really quickly. If it's a sharp cleaver, then we could use the same technique, cleaver on the cutting board with the tip down, fingertips curled under, and simply cut anything that we choose to. Since the blade is so straight and so rigid, then it's not going to move around on you. So you always know the blade's going to be. And the best thing about a cleaver is you can pick up all your food, put it where you need to put it, because it also works as a spatula. Cleavers come in many different sizes, and they're all sized by their number. This is a size 1. This is also a size 1. You see they're the same depth, but different amount of blade. Okay, so let's do some cutting. Here's a carrot. I'm going to choose that same chef's knife I chose before, and now I want to make cubes. I'm going to cube this piece of carrot. So discard the parts I don't need, take the carrot, and I know that this carrot's going to wiggle around on the cutting board for me, so I want to make a flat spot. Take my knife, get my knuckles up against the board, and simply cut down the carrot, and now the carrot's flat. So this carrot, now that it's flat, won't be moving around. So I'm going to cut the carrot into even slices. Now I have even slices. I want even dices, and here's what's really important about cutting vegetables. We want them all to be the same size so they cook at the same speed. If I tried to cook this piece of carrot and this piece of carrot, they would both cook at totally different speeds. This one would be mushy and disgusting before this one was even tender. So my job as a chef is to see that I cut each piece of vegetable the same size. So we have the slices I made earlier, slice 2 more, now I have juliennes. From my julienne, I can make my dice. So I put those pieces together, tip of the knife on the cutting board, and simply use that same rocking motion, moving my fingers back. So I have diced carrots, all the same size. So all of these dices will cook at the same speed, and I will have a delicious soup, stock, or whatever I'm trying to cook.